Things seem to be moving at a breakneck speed when it comes to removing DEI from Hollywood. Variety has a new article that they've released, along with Forbes and some others, where they are really breaking down what's happening in the industry as major companies like Warner and Paramount, who owns BET, and other very big companies like Disney are starting to remove these programs one by one. I'm here to dig into really what's happening, take a look at both sides, and really analyze where we are with this. So let's go ahead and dig into it. Before we kick things off, I want to ask you to give us a subscription. Just hit that subscribe button down below. It's free of charge. It doesn't cost you anything to throw us that sub. As this channel continues to grow, we'd really appreciate it. I'm keeping everyone up to date on the things happening in the entertainment industry, whether it's news or just reviews on new films and things that are coming out in theaters or at home. But going ahead and digging into this article from Variety, which states that Hollywood ditches DEI to avoid Donald Trump's wrath. The title of this article kind of says it all for how this is being painted, which is just that they really do want to put the focus on Trump and not the fact that it's an overall administration that wants this, and even more so the American people who voted for him, and that this might actually be what they want as well. But the thing is that these media outlets wear their opinions on their sleeves, and that's what you're getting with this article to a degree. But I will say that I was surprised because we are noticing across the industry, whether it's Forbes or Variety, any of these sites, they are starting to pull back some of the divisive and very propagandistic, is that a word? Language that is being used in these articles that they've been using for years, which is just it's not even borderline. They're just op-eds at this point, spewing a bunch of personal opinions. So with this article and the way that it breaks things down, it says in 2023, Warner Brothers Discovery launched its Diversity Digest, a quarterly update on the company's DEI efforts. The first installment highlighted Latino representation with Blue Beetle and home renovation show Rico to the Rescue. But after regular updates in 2024, the digest went silent after the election of President Trump. Last week, the feature was dropped from the company's DEI page, along with WBD's commitments to equity and diversity overreach, as the company narrowed its focus to inclusion. The move came as Trump has sought to stamp out DEI programs at the federal level and threaten civil and criminal investigations of private companies. Last month, the Federal Communications Commission opened an investigation of Comcast, the parent of NBC Universal and MSNBC, for possibly pursuing invidious forms of discrimination under the DEI banner. Now, this last little bit here is actually probably the most important thing, which is the litigation part. And this is something that I've been personally talking about for a while, which is just that, like it or not, regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, these DEI programs have tiptoed very closely around breaking civil rights violations when it comes to discrimination. And the fact that they are really targeting certain races for hiring, but not just races, they are doing it with gender, with race, and with sexuality. All of this stuff is really wild and plays no actual role in how the job is going to be carried out, or if these people being hired are the best person for the job, which is back in the day when all of these civil rights things were being implemented. All of that was supposed to stop this from happening. Now, I do understand where the group comes from that wants to push the DEI things, which is just that if there are people that are being underrepresented, they want to call light to it and then hopefully put them in positions where they can have a say, which I understand. The problem is that where the rubber meets the road is where you are discriminating against certain groups and types of people for hiring them. And Hollywood at large has been kind of the poster child for this, and it's been happening to a massive degree. And there have been multiple other cases besides this one where they are getting litigated against because they are intentionally not hiring things like straight white men for roles and avoiding them regardless of whether they are the best person for the job or not, which is a problem. I did bring up some stuff about the civil rights movements here and what happened back in 1964 and basically some of the things that came along with it. But it is very interesting because we've gotten to watch this really play out in real time with Hollywood because it's on such a public stage in these private companies, like what's pointed out here in this Forbes article, because it's not just Hollywood where this has been happening. It talks about State Street. They're talking about Goldman Sachs and BlackRock and all of these companies. They are one by one starting to remove not only this language, but the way in which these things are carried out in these companies because it's, well, causing legal issues. And that's where Hollywood is right now. And the biggest thing that many people have been pointing out is that with Hollywood, the thing is that people are able to speak with their money on these things, and they are able to speak by showing up for or showing interest in watching these things that are clearly diversity projects and really revolving around not much more than that. Actually, the AV Club has a very op-ed style article here that's more along the lines of the ones that we've been seeing of late. And they are talking about how certain programs are being canceled, like with Win or Lose series, where it cut out a whole bit about a trans child, which many people had a lot of issues with. And then also an HBO show, Gorgita Chronicles, which I'm pretty sure that is a item on the Taco Bell menu, but apparently has been canceled as well. And people are connecting it to issues with DEI. But the big thing here is that what you really need to hone in on as well is that these are businesses, these are companies, and if people are not showing up for these projects and not wanting to see them, then, well, they won't watch them. And then if they're not watching them, these companies aren't making the money and not generating the interest that they think that they would. And this is one of these things where you could pull up simple statistics like the population rates within the United States just alone, where it's like 61% white, 18% Hispanic or Latino, 12 Black or African, and 2 or more races is 10%, and it keeps going from there. So the thing is that the United States is majority white, and a lot of these other countries are as well. And if what all of these DEI folks claim, which is that you want to see representation, you want to see people that look like you, that act like you, that sound like you, that is what these DEI folks say, right? If that is the case, then it would make sense why people aren't showing up for these projects that don't represent them and they can't relate to when the majority of the people in the country are of a certain race. These statistics and overrepresentations go outside of just the race subject, though. This also connects to the LGBT stuff because we are looking at only 7% of Americans that prescribe to this type of sexual identity. And that's the thing. I mean, look at that percentage, 7% out of 100. And yet we are seeing a vast increase in these types of characters in shows to the point in which I have seen shows like, for example, Sandman, which came on Netflix, where we had entire episodes where every single solitary character was LGBT. And then outside of that, just throughout the entire show, that was the case as well. And we have many shows like this that are out. And it's not to say that that representation can't be there, but also it's 7% of people. And if you are overrepresenting that by and large, people aren't going to relate to it. They're not going to get it. And they're not going to understand why a very large percentage of characters in these shows represent in that way, in which it does not reflect the real world or the real life at large. So you've got to either be on one side of this or the other. But I think the bigger thing really with most of this is that regular folks just feel the forced nature of it. They can tell that this is being rammed down their throat in a very borderline, well, a lot of folks perceive it as an insidious way because it doesn't come across as genuine or real. It comes across as almost mandated to where it's written into the scripts. And like I said, Hollywood has gotten to wear these things on their sleeves, and people have been able to react to them in real time, which has become clearly a problem. And now the question is Hollywood actually doing this to avoid Trump's wrath, or is it that they are using Trump's wrath as an excuse because these things haven't been making them money? Which, if I were to make a guess and were to put a bet on it, it would be that these companies have been looking to do some of these things for a while, but couldn't quite figure out the right way to do it, because we know that project after project that is DEI focused and centered tend to not do super well. Now, you have your outliers like the Barbie film, but by and large, that is not a super common thing where it wears it on its sleeve to that level and talks about race or gender or sexuality and is just constantly hammering you with it and has an actual mainstream appeal. And I don't think that the thing with Barbie could be carried out in the exact same way and would be the success that it was even back then, just simply due to deceptive marketing practices and things like that, which a lot of people just didn't know what they were getting into, and walking that line in a certain way to where people could interpret it different ways. So all of that gets very complicated. But the big thing here is just that these companies seem to be pulling it from their slates, some of these projects, and then also just what is happening on an internal level. Like I said, so Warner Brothers Discovery here on February 27th, this talks about how they've changing it to the inclusive team and talking about inclusion versus the DEI full like naming of this. And then not far from that, on February 26th, was Paramount, which no longer uses diversity targets tied to race or gender in hiring. And that is the smart move there, because you can't do that. You literally can't and shouldn't, because it is discrimination at its core. And it's just not proper hiring practices and breaks the law. We also have companies like Pepsi and some of these others that are just very big players. So it is not just Hollywood. And the big one here that a lot of people were talking about back on February 11th was that Disney is doing the exact same thing and shifting the performance metric used to evaluate employees to talent strategy before, when it was diversity and inclusion, which is wild that talent was not the primary focus, because, well, we see how that works when you get the wrong people in jobs and you're just hiring them because they're checking off boxes, which, believe it or not, that is a thing that some of these companies and groups were doing, was literally sending out check boxes where you could break it down to mental illness, or if you were something like an amputee, and they were literally hiring based off of these very surface level physical characteristics. But what was really wild was even the mental illness stuff, and that you would actually feel comfortable asking that and then potentially hire based off that. It's kind of mind blowing. But this article is fairly dense, and I was surprised at how fairly well they handled it. But one thing that I did want to come down to here at the bottom was a statement made by one of these individuals, Stacy Smith of USC Annenberg, says, well, the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative agrees, saying companies have bigger problems than the chaos in Washington. It's the audience that the C-suite should fear the most. And that's the interesting thing, because I think that this person was actually saying it in a way in which, like, oh, the audience is going to have a problem that you're removing all of these programs and the things that you were doing, and they're not going to show up. That's just not the case. I think actually she was more right in that the audience has been speaking. These companies have been seeing the effects of it, and now they have a really good excuse to walk a bunch of this stuff back before, one, they get litigated against, or two, they just stop making all money because people are kind of over it. So I think that we just need to get back to quality filmmaking, quality cinematography, hiring the right people for jobs, and not focus so much on these surface level things. I know that to some people that might seem controversial, which is honestly kind of wild to me. And I do understand and get that we want to make sure that there aren't people being left out of jobs. And I understand that when you have certain demographics, like what we have here in the United States, where it is predominantly white, and that is the majority of the people applying for jobs, then there is going to be a higher percentage of those people getting those jobs. But in all honesty, wouldn't that make sense? If anything, and that is the big thing here, is that they weren't even basing any of these percentages on how they were hiring. A lot of these companies were doing things like saying 50% of staff had to be X or Y. And that is just wild, considering that they were pulling from very small percentage pools instead of the larger ones. So all of this just really does get so hairy, but it seems like Hollywood and all of these companies is really starting to walk things back and really analyze what's going on. And I'm curious to see how all of this is going to shake out, because people have been speaking with their wallet of late, and whether the people that are pro this or not, are where they sit with it. The thing is, you can't really deny that a lot of these projects and initiatives are getting pushed back against. Even something as simple as the new Captain America movie, where people just did not feel that the progression of Anthony Mackie's character becoming Cap felt natural or organic. It felt more DEI related. And when you start looking into the things happening internally at Disney, that is what's happening. And people start to pick up on these things, where you just start to notice things feeling inorganic, starting to feel out of place and not quite like they were maybe intended to be that way, more so forced to be that way, and nobody likes that. This is art. You shouldn't control art in that kind of a way to where you can't even win certain types of awards and things if you aren't checking off certain boxes and meeting certain levels of criteria. And that's a bit of a problem because you are controlling down to the most minute detail the type of art that's being put out. And then, is it even art at this point? What is it? It's just this corporate thing that is being put out to please people in one way or the other. So I do want to hear your thoughts below. I know that some of this stuff I'm saying can be controversial to some, but it is discussions that need to be had in a very positive and just progressive way. And we need to really find a balance between what was being done in these companies and what possibly could be done to help some of these things, and then to also just make it right from where they were before. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if I'm just totally wildly off base about all of this, then hey, let me know. But I'm all for positive and civil conversations here. So let me hear all that. And like I said before, make sure to give us that subscribe on the Criticalist Cast channel. We really appreciate it as we grow. But I will be back with either some more news or honestly, probably a review of Daredevil Born Again episodes 1 and 2. It's either going to be excellent or it's going to be a nightmare for Disney. I haven't decided which yet. Well, Disney and Marvel, but we'll see. So I will probably be dropping a review for that tomorrow. But until then, everybody take it easy. We'll see you later. Bye.